Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, far from your comfy bed and glowing screens, into the bustling, grimy, and surprisingly dangerous world of ancient Rome. Imagine yourself there, the cacophony of street vendors, the scent of stale wine and something vaguely unidentifiable in the air, the constant shuffle of togas and the clatter of chariots. You're a sharp mind, a quick hand, and you've landed yourself what seems like a plum job. A scribe. Sounds pretty safe, right? Cushy even, compared to, say, a gladiator or a sewer cleaner. You probably won't survive this narrative unscathed, but hey, that's what makes history fun, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below with your location and local time, so I know where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself hunched over a wax tablet, or perhaps a roll of papyrus, the stylus scratching rhythmically. Your fingers are nimble, your mind sharp, as you meticulously copy official documents, legal texts, or even the latest poetic verses. It's a job that requires immense concentration, a steady hand, and an almost encyclopedic knowledge of Latin, and sometimes Greek, grammar, and rhetoric. You're literate in a society where most people, even many of the wealthy elite, are not. This makes you valuable, a crucial cog in the vast administrative machine of the Roman Empire. But this very value, this unique skill set, puts you in a surprisingly precarious position. You see, while your daily tasks might seem mundane, replicating endless lines of text, keeping records, drafting letters for a senator who can barely scrawl his own name, the stakes are incredibly high. The very words you write, the documents you create, carry immense weight. They dictate laws, record property, communicate imperial decrees, and even preserve the sacred traditions of Roman religion. One misplaced comma, one incorrectly transcribed name, one subtle alteration, and the ripple effects could be catastrophic. You are the silent architect of information, but also its most vulnerable point. Think about it. Who do you blame when a law is misread, or a historical account seems to contradict itself? The messenger, of course, or in this case, the one who penned the message. Historians still argue whether the widespread illiteracy among the Roman elite was a deliberate strategy to consolidate power among the scribal class, or simply a reflection of the times. Regardless, it certainly highlighted the immense power and thus the immense danger wielded by those who could read and write. You, the scribe, are a keeper of secrets, a purveyor of truth, and, perhaps most perilously, a potential scapegoat for any misfortune that arises from the written word. It's not just about getting fired. In ancient Rome, mistakes could lead to far more permanent forms of unemployment. For instance, did you know that some wealthy Romans would sometimes blind their most skilled enslaved scribes to prevent them from forging documents or writing for rivals? A truly quirky tidbit about the lengths patrons would go to maintain control over their intellectual property. Your hands ache, your back protests, but you dare not slacken your pace. The light from the oil lamp flickers, casting dancing shadows on the wall, making the already difficult task of copying minuscule script even more challenging. You might be working in a scriptorium, a dedicated room within a wealthy household or a public building, or perhaps even in the bustling Roman Forum itself, sitting at a portable desk. The noise is constant, the distractions many, yet your focus must remain absolute. Each stroke of the stylus is a testament to your skill, but also a potential trapdoor. Imagine copying an imperial edict, a direct order from the emperor himself. These aren't just polite suggestions. They are the law, carrying the full weight of Roman authority. You're expected to reproduce them perfectly, without error, often for immediate public display. You can practically feel the eyes of officials, senators, and even common citizens scrutinizing every letter once your work is done. If a crucial detail is omitted, if a fine is misstated, or if a directive is somehow garbled, the consequences don't fall on the emperor, or his advisors, or the messenger who carries the scroll. No, the blame, and often the brutal punishment, lands squarely on you. Consider a scenario: a newly decreed tax law, complex and filled with specific exemptions and penalties. You diligently copy it, hours blurring into one another as you strive for perfection. But in your exhaustion, you omit a single line, a small clause that changes who is exempt from a particular levy. This seemingly minor oversight could lead to widespread confusion, public outcry, and a significant loss of revenue for the state. When the error is discovered, and it will be discovered, who faces the emperor's wrath? Not the busy senator who drafted the ambiguous language, but you, the scribe whose hand put it to parchment. You might find yourself facing a public flogging, forced labor in the mines, or even a swift, brutal execution. It's not just about losing your job, it's about losing your life over a misplaced word. The pressure for absolute accuracy was immense, a constant hum of anxiety accompanying every stroke of your stylus. You are, in essence, the human printing press of your era, but one that could be broken for a typo. You clutch the stylus tighter, your knuckles white. The memory of old Silvanus, the scribe from the next insula over, flashes in your mind. He had been a meticulous man, known for his beautiful hand. Yet he disappeared one day. The whispers said he'd made a mistake transcribing a boundary dispute, favoring one senator's land claim over another's. An honest error, perhaps, but one that cost a powerful man a valuable vineyard. The perils of imperial edicts are not just about the emperor's direct wrath. They extend to the intricate web of Roman society, where every powerful individual has a vested interest in the written word. You are the invisible hand that makes their world legible, and therefore you are always under scrutiny. Imagine a scenario, not of direct imperial command, but of a senator's private correspondence. He dictates a letter, perhaps to a distant governor, outlining a political maneuver, or even subtly maligning a rival. Your task is to capture his exact words, his precise tone. But what if he mumbles or changes his mind mid-sentence? What if you, in your human fallibility, mishear a crucial word, changing a compliment into an insult or a strategic alliance into a declaration of enmity? The senator, upon discovering the error, won't blame his own poor articulation or the chaotic environment. He'll blame you, the scribe, for your supposed incompetence, or worse, for deliberate sabotage. His fury could manifest in a public shaming, a loss of your livelihood, or even physical violence. Remember that peculiar Roman custom of paterfamilias having absolute authority over his household, including slaves and even free dependents? This power extended to your life, making you astonishingly vulnerable to a patron's whims. A mainstream historical fact here: the legal concept of patria potestas gave the head of the family immense power, often including the right to punish, enslave, or even kill members of his household. You, as a scribe, often fell under this umbrella of absolute authority, especially if you were an enslaved person. Now shift your focus to the sacred. Rome is a city steeped in religious tradition, with countless rituals, prophecies, and sacred texts that must be preserved and copied. You might find yourself tasked with transcribing an augur's omens, or perhaps a portion of the Sibylline books, ancient prophetic utterances deemed vital for the state's well-being. This is where the danger escalates to a divine level. Making an error in such a text isn't just a mistake, it can be interpreted as accidental blasphemy. The gods, the Romans believed, were meticulous and unforgiving. A single miscopied line could, in the minds of the devout, offend a deity, leading to pestilence, famine, or military defeat. And who would bear the brunt of the people's superstitious fury? The one who defiled the sacred words, of course. You. The consequences for such an error could be dire. You might face public ostracization, forced exile, or even a ritualistic punishment intended to appease the angered gods. It wasn't uncommon for individuals perceived to have offended the divine to be subjected to particularly gruesome ends. Historians still argue whether the Roman state genuinely believed in the direct divine retribution for scribal errors, or if it was a convenient excuse to punish those who undermined authority or social order through their perceived incompetence. Either way, for you, the scribe, the risk was terrifyingly real. It's a subtle shift from political danger to existential dread, where your very soul, as well as your body, is on the line. And then there's the truly insidious danger, forgery and its fatalities. Imagine the immense value placed on official documents in a society that relied so heavily on written records. Land deeds, wills, contracts, citizen rolls, tax records. Your skill set, the ability to perfectly mimic another's hand, to make a document look utterly authentic, suddenly becomes a weapon. You could be coerced, bribed, or even unknowingly used by unscrupulous individuals to create fake documents. A forged will could disinherit an entire family. A fraudulent land deed could seize vast estates. A doctored tax record could siphon immense wealth from the public coffers. If you are caught engaging in forgery, the punishment is swift and brutal, often culminating in a gruesome public execution. Rome had no patience for those who undermined the very foundation of its legal and economic systems. The Lex Cornelia de Falsis, a comprehensive law against forgery, stipulated severe penalties, including crucifixion, decapitation, or being thrown to wild beasts in the arena. You might find yourself bound, dragged through the streets, and then made an example of, all for the sake of a few lines of illicit script. Even if you were merely an unwitting tool, pressured into creating a forged document, your fate would likely be the same. The legal system, while sophisticated in some ways, rarely offered much leniency for the small fry when powerful interests were at stake. You might have seen the gladiatorial games in the Colosseum, a spectacle designed to entertain, yes, but also to remind everyone of the state's absolute power. You'd probably prefer a quick death from a lion to the drawn-out torment of crucifixion, but neither is a particularly appealing career benefit. Remember that old joke about crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, at least that only gave you a rash. Forgery could cost you your head. Your intellect, your very literacy, is a double-edged sword. It elevates you above the unlettered masses, granting you access to knowledge, power, and influence. You rub shoulders with senators, generals, and wealthy merchants. You understand the inner workings of the state, the flow of commerce, the philosophical debates of the age. But this proximity to power, this insight into the machinations of Rome, also makes you a target. You know too much. You have seen too much. Consider a senator who confides a secret to his trusted scribe, perhaps a plot against a political rival or a clandestine financial deal. If this secret leaks, the senator's reputation, fortune, or even life could be ruined. And who would be the prime suspect, the most obvious source of the leak? You, the scribe, the silent witness to his most private thoughts and schemes. You become entangled in political intrigue, a pawn in games far grander and more dangerous than your humble profession suggests. A historical example often debated is the role of scribes in the political machinations surrounding figures like Cicero or Julius Caesar. Did their scribes actively participate, or were they merely accidental conduits of information, risking their lives either way? Historians still argue whether scribes were truly neutral record keepers or often active, albeit silent, participants in political conspiracies. Your unique skill, your access to information, means you're never truly safe. You are a repository of secrets, and such repositories are always vulnerable. Your heart thrums a nervous rhythm against your ribs. You're not just copying texts. You're an unwitting participant in the grand theater of Roman public life. Sometimes, your job requires you to leave the quiet confines of the scriptorium and step into the roaring, unpredictable arena of the forum. This is where the danger of public readings and riots becomes terrifyingly real. Imagine being tasked with reading aloud a newly posted edict, perhaps one that announces an unpopular tax, a conscription drive, or a controversial new law. You stand on the rostra, or a makeshift platform, unrolling the papyrus, your voice echoing over the clamor of the crowd. At first, there's a murmur, then growing unease, and suddenly, a roar of disapproval. The Roman mob, as history often reminds us, was notoriously fickle and easily incited. One moment they might be cheering a general, the next they could be throwing rotten vegetables at a magistrate. You, the face delivering the unwelcome news, become the immediate target of their frustration and anger. You might find yourself pelted with refuse, jostled, or even trampled if the crowd turns into a full-blown riot. Forget about security guards. In the chaos, you're just another figure to be assailed. Your ability to read and project your voice, usually an asset, now makes you terribly conspicuous and vulnerable. Historians still argue whether these public readings were genuinely democratic acts or merely theatrical displays designed to appease and sometimes manipulate the Roman populace. Either way, for the scribe, it was a high-stakes performance. The sheer pressure of perfection weighs on you constantly, a phantom hand pressing down on your shoulder. Every stroke, every character, must be flawless. In a world without corrective fluid or easy deletions, a significant error means starting over, wasting precious papyrus or parchment, materials that were incredibly expensive. But beyond the material cost, there's the cost to you. A scribe who frequently makes errors is not just inefficient. They are seen as incompetent, unreliable, and potentially dangerous. Your reputation, your livelihood, hinges on your meticulous accuracy. Think about the sheer volume of text you might be expected to produce. Days blend into nights, illuminated by the dim, smoky light of oil lamps. Your eyes ache, your hand cramps, your mind grows weary. Fatigue is your constant companion, and fatigue breeds mistakes. But a mistake in a legal contract, a census record, or a military order could have devastating real-world consequences. A misplaced number in a legion's muster roll could send an entire unit into the wrong battle. An incorrect detail in a land dispute could cost a family their ancestral home. For such errors, the punishments weren't merely economic. You could be beaten, publicly shamed, or even worse. The Romans had little patience for incompetence, especially when it impacted matters of state or property. This unrelenting demand for error-free work, coupled with the grueling conditions, makes the scribe's life a high-wire act, with a very long drop if you stumble. Then there's the fickle nature of the powerful figures you serve. Roman society was deeply hierarchical, and your place, even if you were a free citizen, was often subordinate to a wealthy patron. You might be employed by a senator, a powerful merchant, or even an emperor. While this provided a degree of stability, it also subjected you to the whims and rages of your employer. Displeasing a powerful patron could lead to harsh, often fatal retribution, regardless of whether your offense was genuine or merely perceived. Imagine your patron, already in a foul mood from a bad business deal or a political setback, discovers a minor error in a document you copied. Perhaps you used the wrong verb tense, or your handwriting was less than pristine that day. In their frustration, they might lash out at you, the easiest and most accessible target. Punishments could range from a brutal beating, a common occurrence for both enslaved and lower status free individuals, to being cast out with nothing, essentially a death sentence in a society where patronage was vital for survival. You could be blamed for perceived disloyalty or for simply being the bearer of bad news. The arbitrary nature of power meant that your safety was always contingent on the mood and disposition of your patron. A quirky tidbit: some patrons were known to reward their scribes with small luxuries or even manumission, freedom for enslaved scribes. But these acts of generosity were always at the patron's discretion, underscoring their absolute power over your fate. You might be indispensable, but you were never truly safe from their wrath. Your access to information, your role as a human repository of data, means you are constantly privy to the secrets they knew. Senators' private correspondence, legal strategies, financial dealings, military intelligence, personal scandals, you transcribe it all. You are a silent witness to the inner workings of Roman power, the whispered conspiracies, and the hidden vulnerabilities of the elite. This knowledge, while making you valuable, also makes you a significant liability. If a powerful individual suspects that you might reveal their secrets, or if those secrets are inadvertently exposed through your work, you immediately become a target. Silence is often bought with gold, but sometimes it's bought with blood. You could be kidnapped, tortured for information, or simply assassinated to ensure your discretion. The Roman world was not a place for due process when powerful interests were at stake. The very information you processed, the intimate details of the lives of the powerful, became a sword hanging over your head. This danger was particularly acute during periods of political upheaval, like the proscriptions of Sulla or the civil wars after Caesar's death, when enemies were ruthlessly eliminated, and those who held compromising information were especially vulnerable. You remember old Marcus, the wealthy merchant's scribe, who suddenly vanished without a trace after transcribing a series of dubious contracts. The whispers suggested he knew too much about his patron's illicit dealings. Your knowledge is power, yes, but in ancient Rome, power could be brutally self-preservatory, and you, the knower of secrets, could easily be deemed expendable. The air in the scriptorium feels thick and heavy, not just with the scent of ink and old papyrus, but with the silent weight of what you're writing. You might be asked to copy legal texts or administrative documents. But sometimes, a roll of parchment arrives that feels different. It's not for public record or business, but something secretive, something that smells of dissent. You find yourself copying heretical texts, forbidden philosophical treatises, or writings from new unsanctioned religions that challenge the state-approved Roman pantheon. This is a quiet, clandestine danger. The risks aren't from a furious crowd or a betrayed patron, but from the slow, methodical reach of Roman authorities. The state, particularly as Christianity began to rise and challenge traditional Roman religion, was vigilant against anything that could be perceived as a threat to its social and political order. A scribe found copying Gnostic Gospels or early Christian epistles could face severe punishment, not just for the act of writing, but for the perceived act of treason against the gods of Rome and the stability of the empire. You could be accused of impiety, a serious crime that could lead to torture and public execution. The danger is twofold. You risk the wrath of the authorities and the quiet condemnation of your own community, who might fear that your involvement could bring misfortune upon them all. Historians still argue about the extent to which early Christian scribes deliberately risked their lives to preserve their faith's texts, or if many simply didn't see the immediate danger until the persecutions intensified. Either way, for the person holding the stylus, the risk was chillingly personal. Beyond the political and religious dangers, there are the more mundane, but no less perilous threats to your well-being. Life in ancient Rome was often unhygienic, with crowded living spaces and limited sanitation. As a scribe, you are often confined to a cramped, poorly ventilated room for hours on end, surrounded by others. This makes you particularly vulnerable to plagues and poor conditions. Imagine a plague sweeping through the city, as they did with terrifying frequency. The Antonine Plague, for example, devastated the Roman Empire in the 2nd century. In your crowded scriptorium, where a cough from one person quickly becomes a fever for all, you are in a biological trap. The very nature of your work, the proximity to others, and the lack of fresh air and sunlight make you a prime target for disease. Unlike a farmer working in an open field or a soldier marching in the fresh air, you are locked in a room where every breath could be your last. Even without a major plague, the constant exposure to ink fumes and dust from papyrus and parchment could take its toll on your lungs. Your body, not just your mind, is at risk from the simple act of doing your job. The physical toll of your craft is also a quiet, relentless enemy. The hours spent hunched over, the repetitive motion of your hand, the strain on your eyes in poor light, all of this takes a serious toll. We're talking about manual labor's toll in a time before ergonomic chairs or even decent spectacles. Your back aches, your neck is stiff, and your fingers cramp into a permanent curve around the stylus. You might develop what we now call repetitive strain injuries, or suffer from cataracts and other vision problems that, in ancient Rome, had no cure. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman medical texts, like those of Galen, describe various ailments consistent with occupational hazards of scribes, though they didn't have the modern terminology. A quirky tidbit: to combat the eye strain from copying in low light, some scribes would write in a script known as uncial, which used rounded letters and no connecting lines, making it easier to read and write. But even with these small innovations, the physical danger to your body was immense. Now consider the worst-case scenario. Rome is under siege, or a civil war has broken out. You, as a literate individual, become a strategic asset, but also a specific target. the threat of war and conquest looms large. During conflicts, armies need scribes to draft battle plans, to communicate with allies, and to keep records of spoils and casualties. But what happens if you are captured by the enemy? As a literate person, you are a valuable prize. You could be tortured for intelligence, forced to forge documents for the enemy, or simply executed to prevent you from aiding your own side. Unlike a baker or a blacksmith, your skills are directly tied to the flow of information and power, making you a primary target. You're not just a civilian caught in the crossfire. You are a specific high-value asset. You could be taken and forced into service, or you could be killed as a way to cripple the enemy's ability to communicate. The dangers of warfare for a scribe are intellectual and physical, both equally terrifying. This danger is amplified exponentially if you are an enslaved person. Enslaved scribes' vulnerability is a unique and tragic aspect of Roman society. Many scribes were enslaved, often educated from a young age specifically for this role. While their literacy gave them a higher status than a field slave or a quarry worker, it did not grant them freedom or safety. On the contrary, their value as property made them susceptible to their owner's whims and brutality in ways that a free citizen could never be. An enslaved scribe could be sold, transferred, or even tortured for information without legal recourse. If their patron was defeated in a political struggle, the enslaved scribe could be punished simply for being the property of a discredited man. They were also used for tasks that a free scribe might refuse, such as forging documents or handling sensitive, dangerous information. Their lives were entirely at the mercy of their owners, who could choose to blind them to prevent forgery, sell them to a dangerous rival, or punish them in a way that would be illegal for a free person. It's a sad irony that the very skill that elevated them also made their existence more precarious, subject to the arbitrary brutality of a master who saw them as nothing more than a valuable tool. Your fingers ache, cramped into the shape of your stylus, and you feel a profound sense of weariness that seeps not just into your bones, but into your very spirit. Your craft is so painstaking, so fleeting. You, the human repository of a culture's knowledge, are ultimately just a person, and your life's work is incredibly fragile. This is the impermanence of their craft. The vast majority of the papyrus scrolls you meticulously copy, the wax tablets you transcribe upon, will not survive. They'll be lost to fire, flood, pests, or simply the ravages of time. This means that your hard work, your endless hours of squinting and writing, often feels temporary, almost futile. You might spend a month copying a great philosophical treatise, only for it to be lost in a library fire a few years later. Unlike the stonemason who builds a temple that stands for centuries, or the sculptor whose work endures, your creations are fragile. This ephemerality contributes to the low social status of many scribes. While some were highly respected, particularly those in the imperial court, many were seen as little more than human copying machines, their work as transient as a breath of wind. A quirky tidbit. To combat the impermanence of papyrus, some scribes in later Roman times began to use vellum and parchment, prepared animal skins, which were far more durable, but also significantly more expensive and reserved for only the most important texts. Still, for the majority of your career, you're working with a material that can be eaten by bugs, ruined by a drop of water, or turned to dust. The fragility of your work also reflects the precariousness of your own existence. Your skills are in demand, but your person is often seen as disposable. This is especially true for enslaved scribes, whose lives were tied to the fortunes of their masters. If a master falls out of favor, is exiled, or dies, you could be sold to someone else, regardless of your personal attachments or circumstances. The constant threat of being sold, of having your entire life uprooted on a whim, adds a layer of profound insecurity to your daily life. You are, in effect, a walking piece of property, and the fact that you can read and write doesn't change that fundamental reality. Let's trace the flow of Roman life now, beyond the scriptorium walls, and see how the dangers of your job intersect with the dangers of the broader Roman world. You're asked to copy a will, a complex document that determines the fate of a wealthy family's fortune. You are, for all intents and purposes, the executor's hand. If a relative suspects the will is a forgery, or if they are unhappy with their inheritance, they might look for a scapegoat, and you, the scribe, are the perfect one. They could accuse you of tampering with the document, of being in league with another family member, or of simply being incompetent. The legal system, while it had its due processes, was often swayed by wealth and influence. You could find yourself on trial for your life, your only defense being your own shaky testimony against a powerful, vindictive family. This brings us to a crucial point about the Roman legal system. The testimony of an enslaved person was only considered valid if it was given under torture. A free person's word might hold some weight, but an enslaved scribe, who knew the most sensitive secrets, was a particularly vulnerable witness. His or her testimony would only be considered truthful if it was extracted through pain, a chilling and barbaric fact that underscores the complete lack of rights and the extreme peril faced by the majority of scribes. Historians still argue about whether this practice was truly believed to uncover truth, or if it was simply a tool of coercion and social control. But for the enslaved scribe, the distinction didn't matter. The torture was real, and the danger was absolute. You might be asked to copy a legal text, perhaps the 12 Tables, the foundational laws of the Republic. This seems like a straightforward, noble task, but even here, there is danger. If you make a mistake and the error is used in a court case, the defeated party or the outraged public might blame you for corrupting the very laws of Rome. The law, much like the religious texts, was seen as something sacred, something to be preserved with utmost care. A scribe who failed in this duty wasn't just a bad professional. They were a social pariah, a threat to the foundation of Roman order. So you see, the scribe's life, far from being a safe intellectual pursuit, was a constant navigation of traps, both subtle and obvious. You are the keeper of secrets, the transmitter of laws, the silent partner in power plays. And because of this, you are exposed to a unique array of dangers that a soldier, a baker, or a shoemaker would never face. The threats are political, social, physical, and even metaphysical, all stemming from the simple fact that you hold the power of the written word. Your days are long, your pay is often low, and your safety is never guaranteed. You are a crucial, but often unappreciated cog in a vast and dangerous machine. You are a testament to the fact that in ancient Rome, knowledge was indeed power, and a power that could very well cost you your life. As your stylus dances across the papyrus, the ink leaving its dark trail, you can't help but reflect on the sheer volume of information that flows through your hands. Not just public decrees or legal documents, but the private musings, the personal histories, and the very fabric of Roman society, all captured by you. This intimate access to private lives, while sometimes mundane, often leads you into the realm of danger through no fault of your own. Your role is often that of a silent witness, a passive observer. Yet it is precisely this passive presence, that makes you vulnerable to being a pawn in larger, more ruthless games. Consider the meticulous records you keep for a wealthy Roman matron. She dictates her daily expenses, her social engagements, perhaps even her flirtations. To you, it's just data entry, a list of names and numbers. But what if one of those names belongs to a married man and a jealous husband discovers the private correspondence you've transcribed? Or what if her extravagant spending habits, dutifully recorded by your hand, expose her to accusations of profligacy and damage her family's reputation? You, the humble scribe, become the conduit through which scandal can erupt, and the fury of a powerful, embarrassed family could easily turn on you. You're not the one having the affair or spending the money, but you're the one who wrote it down, creating the undeniable proof. This brings us to a less discussed but equally potent form of danger, the potential for you to become a target in social vendettas and familial disputes. Roman society, beneath its veneer of order, was rife with personal rivalries, feuds, and a strong sense of family honor. If a document you've copied, a will, a dowry agreement, a property deed, becomes central to a bitter dispute between powerful families, you, the scribe who created or verified it, instantly become a key and vulnerable figure. You might be subpoenaed to testify in court, placing you in a precarious position where your testimony could offend one powerful party or another, regardless of its truthfulness. Or worse, you could be seen as an impediment to one side's victory, leading them to seek to silence you before you can speak. Historians still argue about the true extent of private vendettas versus state-controlled justice in Roman society. But for the average person, the threat from an angry, powerful family was very real. Imagine the scenario. Two influential families are locked in a dispute over a piece of land, and the boundary lines you copied for one of them are now being challenged. You are called upon to verify your work, but your testimony might contradict a powerful man's claim, or even expose a previous lie. The losing party, desperate and vengeful, might see you as the cause of their misfortune, leading to quiet acts of reprisal rather than open legal challenge. You might find your home ransacked, your family threatened, or even face a mysterious accident in the bustling Roman streets. Your life, suddenly, is cheap compared to the honor or wealth of the elite. And what about the constant demands from your patrons? Not just for accuracy, but for speed. The Roman administrative machine, though impressive, was also relentless. You are part of an ancient information superhighway, and delays can have severe consequences. This leads to the subtle, insidious danger of exhaustion and burnout. You are expected to work long hours, often under challenging conditions, by flickering lamplight, with little regard for your personal well-being. Your body screams for rest, your eyes burn, but the pile of papyrus demanding your attention never shrinks. This chronic fatigue leads to increased errors, as we discussed before, but also to a deeper, more pervasive sense of dread. The pressure to maintain such a relentless pace, combined with the constant fear of punishment for mistakes, creates an environment of extreme stress. This stress, over time, can lead to physical and mental breakdown. In an age without modern understanding of mental health or even basic workers' rights, your well-being is of no concern to your employers beyond your ability to continue producing legible script. A quirky tidbit about this relentless pace. Some Roman authors, like Pliny the Younger, describe dictating entire speeches or letters to multiple scribes simultaneously, each scribe taking down a different portion, highlighting the sheer volume of written communication demanded. You are one cog in this machine, always on the verge of being worn out. Furthermore, your very skill, your ability to wield the written word, makes you a valuable asset not just to legitimate powers, but also to the underworld. You could find yourself unwillingly drawn into criminal enterprises and illicit dealings. Think of smugglers who need fake manifests, or corrupt officials who require fabricated ledger entries to hide their graft. Your ability to create authentic-looking documents, to mimic official seals, is invaluable to those who operate outside the law. You might be approached by a seemingly respectable merchant who, under threat or coercion, forces you to transcribe documents related to his black market activities. Refusal could mean threats to your family or even physical violence. Compliance means becoming an accomplice, and if the illegal operation is uncovered, you, the scribe, are just as guilty in the eyes of the law as the criminal mastermind. Your precise hand, which once seemed so harmless, now becomes a tool for deception and a direct path to the brutal Roman justice system, where conviction for such crimes could mean anything from exile to execution. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, at least it was just a bad smell. Getting involved in criminal enterprises smells like death. Finally, consider the dangers that arise from the very nature of Roman expansion and its shifting borders. As the empire grew, new cultures, new languages, and new legal systems came under Roman sway. You, as a scribe, might be tasked with translating or interpreting documents from newly conquered territories or from client states. This seemingly academic task could, surprisingly, become fraught with peril due to linguistic misunderstandings and cultural clashes. Imagine translating a treaty from Greek or Celtic into Latin. A subtle nuance in one language might not have an exact equivalent in the other. A historical fact: Roman legal texts were incredibly precise, and even slight linguistic variations could have massive implications. If your translation leads to a misunderstanding that sparks a diplomatic incident, or worse, reignites a conflict, you could easily become the scapegoat. You are bridging cultural divides with your stylus, but those bridges are often unstable. The interpretation of a single word could be the difference between peace and war, between prosperity and ruin. And if the outcome is negative, the blame, once again, falls squarely on the one who rendered the words. Historians still argue about the true degree of Roman sensitivity to conquered peoples' languages. Some suggest a pragmatic approach, others a more dismissive one. For you, the scribe, navigating these linguistic minefields was a constant, low-level source of anxiety, adding yet another layer to the already complex and dangerous fabric of your daily life. You wipe the sweat from your brow, the flickering lamplight making the script on the papyrus shimmer and swim before your tired eyes. You're not just a scribe, you're a human database, a living, breathing library. And sometimes this puts you in the direct path of an extremely powerful and often paranoid figure, the emperor. The demands of the imperial household are not like those of a senator or a merchant. They are absolute, and a mistake can be seen not just as incompetence, but as an act of treason. Imagine being tasked with copying the emperor's personal memoirs or his military campaign plans. These documents are state secrets of the highest order. Your proximity to this information gives you a kind of quiet power, but it also puts you on a short leash. You are under constant surveillance, and your loyalty is always in question. A scribe who makes a mistake on an imperial document, A miscopied troop number, a jumbled date for a military action, could be seen as a spy working to undermine the emperor's authority. The paranoia of Roman emperors, from Tiberius to Caligula to Nero, is a mainstream historical fact, and you, the scribe, are a perfect object for their suspicion. They might see a clumsy error as a deliberate act of sabotage, a truly quirky tidbit. Some paranoid emperors would use a cipher, a secret code, for their most sensitive military communications, forcing their scribes to not only write with perfect accuracy, but also to master complex cryptography, adding yet another layer of stress and danger to the job. Historians still argue whether such ciphers were genuinely effective or if they were more of a psychological tool to intimidate their scribes and advisors. Your existence is not just threatened by the living, it is threatened by the dead, or more accurately, by their legacies. You might be asked to transcribe a will that contains a challenge to a deceased's last wishes. Roman wills were complex legal documents, and the stakes for an inheritance could be immense. If you're the one who wrote the will, and a family member feels they've been unfairly disinherited, they might claim the will is a forgery, or that you somehow manipulated the document. The accusation alone is enough to ruin you, and if the family is powerful, you might find yourself on the wrong end of a brutal punishment. The Roman legal system, while sophisticated, was often a tool for the powerful to settle their own scores, and you, the scribe, would be caught in the middle. Your best defense is your reputation for honesty and accuracy, but in a world where truth is often decided by power, that might not be enough. The very act of writing a will, a seemingly straightforward clerical task, could lead to a lifetime of feuds and dangers. Beyond the formal dangers of state and family, there is a more subtle threat: the rise of intellectual rivals. You are a skilled, educated person in a society where such a thing is rare. This makes you a target for jealousy and professional rivalry. Other scribes, or even free citizens who aspire to your position, might seek to undermine you. They could spread rumors about your competence, claim you are a forger, or even plant evidence to frame you. In a competitive environment, where a single patron's favor can be the difference between a comfortable life and a struggle for survival, your colleagues are not always your friends. The intellectual world of Rome, while celebrated for its philosophy and poetry, was also filled with petty squabbles and backstabbing. The very knowledge that makes you valuable also makes you a threat to others, and they might seek to eliminate you as competition. Let's not forget the mundane, but ever-present, threat of physical accidents and injuries. Your workplace is not safe. You are surrounded by precarious stacks of scrolls, flimsy tables, and oil lamps that are a constant fire hazard. A single misstep could send a year's worth of work up in flames, or it could lead to a severe burn, leaving you unable to work. The lack of proper light leads to eye strain and headaches, and the repetitive motion of your hands can lead to debilitating pain. We now know these as repetitive strain injuries, but in ancient Rome, they would be seen as a sign of weakness or a curse, and if you can no longer write, you are no longer useful. Your job is a constant balance between the mental and the physical, and both are in constant peril. You are a highly skilled professional, and yet in many ways, you are as vulnerable as any common laborer. The threat of a broken stylus, a spilled inkpot, or a slip of the hand is a microcosm of the larger dangers that surround you. And finally, consider the ultimate betrayal: slavery and the loss of autonomy. Many scribes were enslaved, often educated from a young age to serve a wealthy household. As an enslaved scribe, your life is not your own. You can be sold, given away, or even killed by your master, with little to no legal repercussion. While your skills may give you a better life than a gladiator or a field slave, you are still a piece of property. Your master could force you to commit a crime, and if you are caught, you would bear the full weight of the punishment. You are a tool, and like any tool, you can be used for good or for ill, but you have no say in the matter. This fundamental lack of freedom, this constant vulnerability to your master's whims, is perhaps the most profound danger of all. A mainstream historical fact is that a significant portion of the Roman populace, including those with specialized skills, were enslaved. Their lives were entirely at the mercy of their owners. The very skill that elevated your social status still couldn't buy you freedom from the ultimate danger of complete lack of control over your own existence. The stylus feels like an extension of your own hand, but it's a hand that is constantly at risk. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, at least it was a choice, albeit a bad one. Your job is a series of non-choices, each one leading to a new, unexpected kind of peril. As you continue to copy legal documents, you find yourself facing another subtle but profound danger: the legal liability for a patron's financial dealings. You're the one who writes down the contracts, the debts, and the investments. You are the formal record of your patron's financial life, and if they fall into ruin, you are often one of the first people to be blamed. Imagine your patron, a wealthy merchant, has a series of bad business ventures. He loses a fleet of ships to a storm. His grain supply is ruined by a blight, and his investments in a new quarry fail. He is now in debt, and his creditors are circling like vultures. Who do they come to for the full picture of his finances? You, the scribe. And who do they blame for any perceived inconsistencies or fraudulent entries? You. You could be accused of aiding in a fraud, of falsifying documents, or of embezzling funds. Your only defense is your honesty and the integrity of your records. But in a world where money talks louder than truth, you could easily be made a scapegoat. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman law had strict penalties for debtors who attempted to hide their assets, and those who aided them in doing so could face equally harsh punishments. Historians still argue whether such accusations against scribes were genuinely believed, or if they were simply a convenient way for creditors to get a pound of flesh from a debtor's household. Beyond the formal legal system, there are the quiet, back-alley dangers that come from the company you keep. Your patron might have enemies, and you, as the person who knows their secrets, could become a target for intimidation from political opponents. A senator who dislikes your patron might send a group of hired thugs to persuade you to reveal sensitive information. They might not use a sword, but they could use fear, threats against your family, or a brutal beating to get what they want. You are a repository of information, and that makes you a valuable target for anyone who wants to harm your patron without a direct confrontation. The danger isn't just from the state or from your patron. It's from the vast interconnected network of power and rivalry that makes up Roman society. And what about your own well-being? We've talked about the mental and physical strain, but what about the risk of punishment for a patron's public humiliation? Your patron, perhaps a wealthy poet, asks you to copy a series of satirical verses mocking a rival. The verses are brilliantly funny, but they cross a line. The rival, a powerful man with a fragile ego, is deeply offended. He cannot openly challenge your patron without appearing weak, so he looks for a more vulnerable target. He finds you, the scribe who put the offensive words to papyrus. He might not be able to accuse you of a crime, but he can use his influence to make your life a living hell. You could be blackballed from other patrons, your reputation could be ruined, or you could simply face quiet acts of retribution that make your life unbearable. The shame and humiliation of your patron are now your burden to bear. This is a form of danger that is not about physical harm or legal peril, but about the slow, crushing weight of social ostracization and professional ruin. The danger also comes from the very nature of your communication. You are a bridge between two parties, but what happens when that bridge becomes the target of a scam? You could be used as a pawn in deception and confidence scams. A person might come to you claiming to be a representative of a powerful senator and ask you to draft a letter promising a lucrative business deal to a third party. You, believing the story, write the letter, your impeccable hand giving it an air of authority. But it's all a scam. The letter is used to defraud the third party, and when the deception is uncovered, you, the scribe, are a key piece of evidence. Your innocence means nothing when your handwriting is on the fraudulent document. You could be arrested, tortured, and even executed for a crime you didn't knowingly commit. A quirky tidbit about Roman confidence scams. One of the most common scams was selling a forged will, which would be given an air of legitimacy by being copied by a skilled and often unwitting scribe. Your honesty is your greatest asset, but it can also be your biggest vulnerability. Finally, there is the ever-present danger of political purges and the fall of a patron. Roman history is filled with stories of powerful figures who fell from grace, were exiled, or were executed. And when a patron falls, their entire household is at risk. Their property is seized, their family is scattered, and their slaves and freedmen are often sold or executed. You, the scribe, are a part of that household. You are a part of your patron's story. And when their story ends tragically, so too can yours. You could find yourself on a list of prescriptions, a list of people to be eliminated. You could be sold into a life of brutal labor. Your loyalty to a man who is now considered a traitor is your death sentence. The danger is not just about making a mistake. It's about being on the wrong side of history. You are a witness to the rise and fall of great men, and when they fall, they often drag everyone around them down with them. The fall of a patron is a terrifying, life-altering event for all those in their orbit, and for you, the scribe who knows their secrets, it is the ultimate danger. The faint scent of parchment and stale lamp oil clings to you, a constant reminder of the hours you spend hunched over texts, weaving the tapestry of Roman life, one word at a time. But this tapestry has dark threads, and sometimes you find yourself directly involved in the grim business of military espionage and intelligence gathering. The Roman Empire was a vast, complex entity, constantly expanding and defending its borders. Information, especially about enemies or rebellious provinces, was paramount. And who better to process and relay that information than a skilled scribe? Imagine you are attached to a legionary commander, or perhaps even a provincial governor on the distant frontiers. Your task is to transcribe intercepted enemy communications, reports from scouts, or even the interrogation notes of captured spies. This isn't just copying, it's decoding, interpreting, and summarizing vital intelligence. Your accuracy can mean the difference between victory and defeat, between the survival of a Roman legion and its annihilation. If you misinterpret a crucial detail about enemy troop movements, or fail to accurately transcribe a plan of attack, the consequences could be devastating. And when the battle is lost or the rebellion flares anew, who is the immediate scapegoat for the communication breakdown? You, the scribe, the final link in the chain of information. The danger is also personal. If you are captured by the enemy, your literacy makes you an invaluable source of information for them. You could be tortured for details about Roman military strength, troop deployments, or logistical weaknesses. Your knowledge, usually a source of pride, becomes a tool for your tormentors. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman legions always had a retinue of scribes and clerks to manage their extensive logistical and communication needs, making them direct participants, and thus targets, in military campaigns. Historians still argue whether captured scribes were typically executed or interrogated for their knowledge. But for you, the individual, the outcome was terrifying either way. The quiet life of a copyist is suddenly thrust into the brutal reality of warfare, where your hands, once only used for writing, might be used to sign your own death warrant. A quirky tidbit about military scribes. Some were even trained in rudimentary codes or ciphers, meaning they held even more sensitive knowledge, making them even more valuable and dangerous assets if captured. Beyond the battlefield, there's another subtle, pervasive danger: the corruption of public records for personal gain. You are responsible for maintaining the integrity of censuses, tax registers, land deeds, and judicial decrees. These are the very bones of Roman administration, ensuring order and accountability. But where there is money and power, there is always temptation for corruption. You might be approached by a wealthy citizen who wants to reduce his tax burden, or acquire a piece of public land illegally, or even erase a criminal record. They offer you a hefty bribe to subtly alter the figures, to forge a signature, or to lose a compromising document. The temptation is real, especially if your own life is a struggle, but the risk is immense. If the fraud is discovered, the punishment for manipulating public records is severe, often involving confiscation of property, exile, or even death. You are not just risking your job, you are risking your life for a few extra denarii. And even if you refuse, the person offering the bribe might become an enemy, spreading rumors about your character or even attempting to frame you. Your integrity, which should be your shield, can sometimes become a vulnerability in a corrupt world. The very physical act of reading and writing, which seems so harmless, can also lead to a quiet, insidious form of danger. Chronic health issues from poor working conditions. We already touched upon the immediate risks of plagues, but consider the long-term impact. You work in poorly lit rooms, often with smoky oil lamps, leading to severe eye strain and eventual blindness. The constant hunching over a desk day after day, year after year, leads to debilitating back pain, spinal deformities, and chronic muscle spasms. Your hands and wrists suffer from repetitive strain, making the very act of writing agonizing. In ancient Rome, there was no understanding of ergonomics, no concept of occupational safety standards. If your body broke down, you were simply replaced. Your health was your own responsibility. And if you became too ill or infirm to work, you were discarded, left to fend for yourself in a society with no safety net. The slow, relentless grind of your daily labor silently erodes your physical well-being, turning your body against you. You might find yourself prematurely aged, racked with pain, and unable to perform the very skill that defines your existence. This is a danger that doesn't arrive in a sudden dramatic moment, but creeps up on you, silently stealing your future. Finally, let's consider the existential dread that arises from the peril of being deemed superfluous or obsolete. In a society that is constantly evolving, new technologies or shifts in administrative practices could render your specific skills less valuable. What if a simpler, faster method of record-keeping emerges? What if political instability leads to a dismantling of the complex bureaucracy that relies on scribes? Your highly specialized skill set, once so vital, could suddenly become redundant. This doesn't necessarily mean immediate physical danger, but it means the danger of utter destitution. If you are no longer needed, you are no longer employed. And in a society with limited opportunities for retraining or social mobility, losing your livelihood means facing poverty, starvation, or even slavery if you are forced to sell yourself or your family to survive. A mainstream historical fact is that societal needs and technologies shifted throughout Roman history, impacting various professions. While scribal work remained crucial for centuries, the specific demands and numbers of scribes could fluctuate. Historians still argue about the exact economic conditions and social safety nets, or lack thereof, for the lower and middle classes in Rome. But for you, the individual scribe, the thought that your very means of survival could simply vanish, leaving you adrift in an unforgiving world, is a quiet terror. Your quill might be your livelihood today, but tomorrow it could be worthless. Your hands, scarred and calloused from years of gripping a stylus, move with a quiet, practiced ease. But even as you perfect your craft, a new kind of danger emerges, not from the powerful or the divine, but from the very instruments of your trade, the lead in your ink, the chemicals used to treat the papyrus, the very air you breathe in your cramped scriptorium. All of these contribute to toxic exposure and occupational diseases. Think about the ink you use. It's not the simple water-based concoction we know today. Roman inks were often made with soot, water, and gum arabic. But the more permanent, high-quality inks contained lead, which was used to give them a dark, rich color. Over time, you're not just breathing in ink fumes, you're absorbing lead through your skin and your lungs. This slow, insidious poisoning can lead to a host of debilitating symptoms: chronic headaches, fatigue, nerve damage, and even madness. A mainstream historical fact is that lead poisoning, while not fully understood in its causes, was a recognized ailment in the Roman world. Historians still argue whether the symptoms were attributed to lead poisoning or if they were seen as a physical manifestation of a moral or spiritual failing. Either way, for you, the scribe, the poison is very real, slowly and silently killing you. A quirky tidbit about Roman scribes and their inks. Some would chew on their stylus or dip their fingers in the ink to test its consistency, actions that would have contributed to even more rapid lead absorption. Beyond the ink, there are the dangers from the very materials you write on. Papyrus, while a natural material, was often treated with chemicals to make it more durable and resistant to pests. Over time, these chemicals, in the form of dust, would get into your eyes, nose, and lungs, causing chronic respiratory problems and skin irritations. Your body, the very tool of your trade, is slowly being poisoned by the raw materials of your craft. And what about the moral and ethical dilemmas that come with your work? You're not a robot. You have a conscience. You might be asked to transcribe a legal document that you know is unjust, or a decree that you believe will harm innocent people. Your master's command is absolute, but your own sense of right and wrong whispers to you in the quiet of the night. What do you do? Do you refuse and risk punishment? Or do you comply and live with the guilt, There is no easy answer. A scribe who refuses a command, even for moral reasons, is seen as disloyal and insubordinate. But a scribe who complies becomes an accomplice to a crime. You are, in effect, a moral prisoner, forced to choose between your own safety and your conscience. There's no such thing as a conscientious objector in ancient Rome. Your job, which seems so intellectual and detached, can force you to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. The danger can also come from a more personal source: the risk of being a witness to a patron's private crimes. Your patron, perhaps a respected senator, is in a rage. You hear the screams of an enslaved person from another room, and you see the aftermath, the blood, the bruises. Or perhaps you transcribe a letter that reveals a murder plot or a plan to defraud an orphanage. You are a witness to a crime, and now you have a terrible choice. Do you report it and risk your life, or do you remain silent and live with the knowledge? This is a quiet, terrifying form of danger. If you report the crime, your patron will know that you, the scribe, betrayed them, and their revenge will be swift and brutal. If you remain silent, you are an accomplice, and if the crime is ever discovered, you are just as guilty as your patron. Your knowledge, once again, is your greatest weakness. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman law had a concept of delatio, or denunciation, but it was often used as a political tool rather than a moral imperative. Historians still argue whether scribes were more likely to report crimes or to remain silent. But for the individual, the decision was a matter of life and death. Your job also puts you at risk of being a victim of identity theft. You have a beautiful hand. You can perfectly mimic another's handwriting. This is your greatest skill, but it is also a source of great peril. A person could steal your wax tablets, your writing tools, and even your own personal documents. They could then use your handwriting to forge documents, to commit crimes, and to ruin your reputation. The crimes would be in your hand, but they would not be your own. You would be a victim of a crime you didn't commit, and in a society that valued the written word so highly, the evidence against you would be undeniable. You would have to prove your innocence against your own handwriting, a task that would be almost impossible. Finally, consider the danger of being seen as a political dissident for your reading material. In a society that valued conformity, and in which new foreign ideas were often seen as a threat, the books you read and transcribe are not a private matter. A Roman official could search your home and find a book of Greek philosophy that is seen as too radical, or a book of Jewish scripture that is seen as a threat to Roman religion. Your reading material, which seems so harmless, could be seen as an act of treason. You could be accused of being a political dissident or a religious heretic, and your punishment would be severe. The very act of reading, which is so vital to your profession, could be your downfall. The danger is not just in what you write, but in what you read. You are a custodian of words, and some words are more dangerous than others. The stylus feels heavier in your hand now, not just from fatigue, but from the weight of all the dangers you've encountered. Your world, initially appearing as a sanctuary of knowledge, is instead a treacherous landscape of hidden perils. Beyond the threats of lead poisoning, political intrigue, and personal vengeance, you face the chilling risk of being used as a scapegoat in public scandals. Roman society, much like any other, loved a good scandal, especially if it involved the elite. And when a powerful figure's reputation was on the line, someone had to take the fall. Often, that someone was the humble scribe. Imagine a senator embroiled in a lurid affair, or a general accused of embezzling funds from a military campaign. Documents, letters, financial ledgers, all transcribed by your hand, might become central to the unfolding drama. While you merely recorded the facts as dictated, your connection to these incriminating papers makes you a convenient target. The powerful, desperate to deflect blame, might accuse you of fabricating evidence, of misrepresenting facts, or even of participating in the misdeeds yourself. Your meticulously kept records, intended to ensure accuracy, suddenly become the very chains that bind you. You could be publicly denounced, subjected to humiliating interrogations, or even physically punished, all to satisfy the mob's desire for justice, or more accurately, for a convenient victim. A mainstream historical fact is that public humiliation and scapegoating were common tactics used by the Roman elite to maintain their image and consolidate power, even at the expense of lower status individuals. Historians still argue whether such public accusations against scribes were genuinely believed, or if they were merely cynical exercises in damage control. For you, the scribe, the experience is a terrifying descent into public infamy, where your reputation, and potentially your life, is sacrificed on the altar of another's honor. Adding to this ever-present anxiety is the danger of inadvertent insults to powerful deities or cults. Rome was a polytheistic society, with a pantheon of gods and goddesses, as well as numerous foreign cults that gained popularity. Each deity, each cult, had its own rituals, its own sacred texts, and its own taboos. You might find yourself copying a text that, perhaps through an obscure reference or an innocent mistranslation, inadvertently offends a powerful god, or, even more dangerously, the zealous followers of a particular cult. Consider a text describing a foreign deity, which you copy for a scholarly patron. Without intending to, your rendition might contain a phrase that is interpreted as disrespectful by the followers of that deity, especially if that cult has a strong, influential presence in Rome. The consequences could range from social ostracism and accusations of impiety to violent retribution from enraged devotees. Unlike the formal legal system, which might offer some semblance of due process, the fury of a zealous cult could be swift and brutal without trial or appeal. Remember that old joke about crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, this kind of accidental insult could lead to a fate far worse than a bad rash, perhaps even a forced sacrifice to appease the offended deity. A quirky tidbit is that some Roman philosophers would deliberately misinterpret or satirize foreign religious texts to mock their rivals, placing their scribes in unwitting peril. You are navigating a minefield of religious sensibilities, where a single misplaced word could ignite a blaze of fanaticism. The very infrastructure of Roman cities, impressive as it was, also harbored its own set of dangers for you. Imagine working late into the night, finishing a crucial document, when a fire breaks out in your insula, apartment building, or even in the public archive where you work. This brings us to the very real danger of fires and collapse of Roman buildings. Roman cities, especially Rome itself, were notorious for their densely packed, often flimsy multi-story buildings, constructed largely of wood and brick. Fires were a constant, terrifying threat, spreading rapidly through the narrow streets and close-set structures. As a scribe, your scriptorium, whether in a private home or a public building, is filled with highly flammable materials: papyrus, parchment, wooden tables, and oil lamps. If a fire erupts, you are trapped in a tinderbox, surrounded by your life's work, which is now fuel for the flames. Escape is often perilous, if not impossible, through crowded, collapsing stairwells. Furthermore, many Roman buildings, particularly the tall insula, were poorly constructed and prone to collapse, especially after heavy rains or earthquakes. You could be crushed by falling masonry, trapped in rubble, or simply buried alive. Your meticulous work and your very life could be extinguished in an instant by the very environment in which you toil. This is a mainstream historical fact. Roman sources like Juvenal frequently lament the dangers of fires and collapsing buildings in Rome. Adding to the layers of personal risk is the potential for kidnapping or forced labor by rival factions. During periods of political unrest, civil war, or even intense political campaigning, the ability to control information was crucial. As a literate individual with access to records and the skill to forge them, you are a valuable asset. Rival factions, desperate for an edge, might abduct you, forcing you to transcribe false documents, create incriminating evidence against their enemies, or simply to deny your skills to their opponents. You could be held captive, forced to work under duress, with threats against your family if you refuse or attempt to escape. Your intellectual ability, which allows you to record and manipulate words, now makes you a tool in a ruthless power struggle, with your freedom and life hanging by a thread. This isn't just about money. It's about power and survival in a brutal political landscape where human lives are expendable. Finally, consider the long-term devastating consequence of your work. Blindness from prolonged eye strain and poor lighting. This isn't a sudden dramatic danger, but a slow, creeping inevitability. You spend countless hours in dim light, often the flickering glow of an oil lamp, meticulously forming tiny characters. The strain on your eyes is immense and unrelenting. Without modern understanding of ocular health or access to corrective lenses, your vision will inevitably deteriorate. By middle age, you might find yourself struggling to see the lines on the papyrus. By old age, you could be completely blind, unable to work, and thus unable to earn a living. In a society with no state-provided welfare, blindness for a scribe means utter destitution, dependency on charity, or a slow, agonizing death. Your most precious tool, your eyesight, is sacrificed for your livelihood, leaving you utterly vulnerable in the twilight of your years. This is a cruel irony that the very act of bringing light to others through the written word ultimately plunges you into darkness. Historians still argue about the exact prevalence of vision problems among Roman scribes, but given the conditions, it's safe to assume it was a widespread and debilitating occupational hazard. The weight of the stylus in your hand feels heavier with each passing day, a constant reminder of the unseen dangers that lurk in the parchment, the ink, and the very air around you. You face the threat of lead poisoning, the arbitrary wrath of patrons, and the silent, creeping doom of blindness. But there's another insidious peril, one tied to the meticulous nature of your craft, the danger of misinterpretations of complex legal or philosophical texts. Imagine you're tasked with copying a dense philosophical treatise by Seneca or a complicated legal commentary by Ulpian. These texts are filled with intricate arguments, subtle nuances, and precise definitions. A single misplaced comma, a subtly altered verb tense, or even a seemingly minor omission could completely change the meaning of a passage. You are not merely a copyist. You are, in essence, an interpreter. And if your interpretation, through error or oversight, leads to a significant misreading by a scholar, a lawyer, or a judge. The consequences could be severe. If a powerful legal case hinges on a passage that you copied incorrectly, and a judgment is made that is later found to be flawed due to your error, you could face legal repercussions. Your reputation would be ruined, and you might even face punishment for incompetence or negligence. The intellectual weight of your work, the very complexity that makes it valuable, also makes it incredibly dangerous. There's no spell check in ancient Rome, no quick way to verify every single word against a perfect original. You are the human filter, and any filter can introduce impurities. Historians still argue about the true textual integrity of many surviving Roman philosophical and legal texts, often debating whether discrepancies are due to scribal error, deliberate alteration, or differences in original manuscripts. For you, the scribe, this abstract scholarly debate is a very real, very personal threat to your livelihood and freedom. Beyond textual errors, there's the more direct, physical threat that emerges from the sheer competitiveness of Roman society. Assassination attempts for knowing too much. As a scribe, you are privy to an astonishing amount of sensitive information: financial dealings, political plots, personal scandals, even military strategies. You are a walking, breathing archive of secrets. And while this knowledge makes you indispensable, it also makes you an extreme liability for anyone whose secrets you hold. If a powerful individual believes you know something that could ruin them, or if you inadvertently stumble upon a secret that puts your patron at risk, you become a prime target for elimination. They might not even accuse you of betrayal. They simply need you silenced. You could be poisoned, stabbed in a dark alley, or suffer a suspicious accident. Roman history is replete with examples of powerful figures using violent means to eliminate perceived threats. And a scribe knowing secrets is a very convenient threat to remove. Remember that story about the crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, at least it was just an external threat. This is an internal one, where your own knowledge becomes a weapon against you. A quirky tidbit about this dark side of Roman life. Some wealthy Romans would employ silent slaves whose tongues were cut out, specifically to prevent them from inadvertently revealing secrets they might overhear. While this wasn't common for scribes, it highlights the extreme lengths patrons would go to ensure discretion. Furthermore, your vulnerability extends to being framed for theft or embezzlement that your patron committed. You handle the financial ledgers, the property deeds, and the records of transactions. You know where every sestertius goes and where it comes from. If your patron is engaged in illicit financial activities, skimming from public contracts, defrauding business partners, or simply hiding wealth from taxation, they might manipulate the records or order you to do so. And if the authorities close in, or a vengeful partner discovers the fraud, who is the easiest person to blame? You, the scribe whose hand signed the falsified documents. Your patron could easily sacrifice you to save their own skin, claiming you acted alone, or that you were the mastermind behind the scheme. The evidence, your own handwriting, would be damning. Proving your innocence would be incredibly difficult against the word of a powerful Roman citizen. You could find yourself stripped of your freedom, property, and even your life for crimes you merely recorded or were forced to participate in. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman law had severe penalties for theft and embezzlement, and enslaved individuals in particular had little legal recourse if accused. The physical dangers continue to mount, even from the very tools of your trade. Beyond lead poisoning, consider the everyday peril of cuts and infections from sharpened styluses or broken quills. Your hands are your livelihood, and they are constantly exposed to sharp objects. A slip of the hand could result in a deep cut from a metal stylus or a jagged broken quill. In an era before antiseptics and antibiotics, even a minor cut could become infected, leading to debilitating illness, gangrene, or even death. A simple scratch, an everyday occurrence in your profession, could turn into a life-threatening ordeal. The constant threat of infection from seemingly harmless tools is a silent, ever-present danger that most people would never consider. Finally, you face the psychological toll of witnessing social injustices and being unable to act. You transcribe the will that disinherits a deserving child. You copy the legal ruling that unfairly favors the wealthy. You record the brutal sentences handed down to the poor and the marginalized. You are a silent witness to the injustices of Roman society, forced to record them, but powerless to intervene. This moral burden, this constant exposure to the darker side of human nature, can wear down your spirit. You are forced to compartmentalize, to numb yourself to the suffering you document. But the weight of that knowledge, the passive complicity, can lead to a quiet despair, a sense of moral erosion. This isn't a physical danger, but it's a danger to your soul, to your humanity. Historians still argue about the degree of moral awareness among Roman scribes and how they reconciled their roles with the often harsh realities of Roman law and society. For you, the scribe, it's a constant battle, not with a lion in the arena, but with your own conscience, a battle you are often forced to lose for the sake of survival. The light in the scriptorium seems to dim, not just from the fading daylight, but from the cumulative weight of all the dangers you face. Your hands, calloused and ink-stained, move automatically, but your mind is a weary tapestry of fears. You've grappled with legal peril, physical ailments, and moral dilemmas. Now you face a new threat, one tied to the very essence of Roman public life, the risk of being associated with a failed political campaign. Imagine your patron is a rising politician, a man with aspirations for the highest offices in Rome. He employs you to draft his speeches, write his campaign literature, and keep meticulous records of his supporters and donors. You are an indispensable part of his political machine. But what happens when his campaign fails? When he is outmaneuvered by a more cunning rival or a public scandal derails his ambitions? The victorious rival will not forget who helped their opponent. They will seek to punish all those associated with the failed campaign, and you, the scribe, are a visible and vulnerable target. You might be blacklisted, making it impossible to find new work. You could be publicly shamed, your reputation ruined, or worse, you could be subjected to quiet acts of retribution, your property destroyed, your family threatened, all because you were on the wrong side of a political contest. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman politics were ruthless, and the victors of a political struggle often sought to eliminate their opponents and their entire support networks. Historians still argue about the extent to which a scribe's political affiliation was known to the public, but it's safe to assume that a scribe in a prominent political household was a known quantity. Your job, which seems so intellectual and detached, has now thrust you into the messy, brutal world of partisan politics, where there are no prizes for second place. Beyond the political sphere, you face a more quiet, insidious danger, the threat of being silenced for knowing sensitive family histories. As a scribe, you are often tasked with documenting births, marriages, deaths, and inheritances for prominent Roman families. You know their secrets, the illegitimate children, the hidden debts, the scandalous affairs that are carefully scrubbed from the public record. This knowledge makes you invaluable, but it also makes you a threat. If a family, perhaps to protect its reputation or to secure a better marriage alliance, fears that you might reveal one of their dark secrets, they might take measures to ensure your silence. They might not kill you, but they could pay you off, send you away, or simply spread rumors about your character to discredit anything you might say. Your knowledge is power, yes, but in this case, it's a power you can't use without risking your own destruction. The very act of transcribing a family's history is like holding a match to a tinderbox, and the family will do anything to make sure you don't light it. A quirky tidbit. Some Roman families would deliberately hire a new scribe for each major event in their lives to ensure that no single person knew all of their secrets, a practice that highlights the deep-seated fear of exposure. The danger can also come from a simple, everyday part of your work, the danger of fire from oil lamps and candles. Your work, which often extends late into the night, is illuminated by the flickering, unsteady light of an oil lamp or a candle. These open flames are a constant fire hazard, especially in a scriptorium filled with flammable papyrus scrolls and wooden furniture. A single misplaced hand, a sudden gust of wind, or a faulty wick could cause a spark that engulfs your workplace in flames. You could be trapped in the burning building, unable to escape, your life and your life's work consumed by fire. This is not a theoretical danger. It is a very real, very common threat in ancient Roman life. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, for example, which was likely caused by accident, destroyed a significant portion of the city and its archives, a testament to the ever-present danger of fire. Your daily existence is a constant negotiation with fire, a constant awareness that a single mistake could cost you everything. You also face the quiet, psychological toll of the stress of deadlines and the fear of failure. Roman society was a world of deadlines. Legal documents had to be filed by a certain date, speeches had to be delivered on time, and business transactions had to be recorded immediately. Your patron doesn't care if you're tired, if your hand is cramped, or if the light is poor. They care only that the work is done, and that it is done perfectly and on time. This relentless pressure, this constant fear of missing a deadline and facing your patron's wrath, can wear you down. It can lead to anxiety, depression, and a sense of constant dread. This is a form of danger that doesn't leave a physical mark, but it can destroy you from the inside out. This is a danger that a gladiator, for all his physical peril, might never face. The stress of failure in ancient Rome was a real and present danger, and you, the scribe, are at the very epicenter of it. Finally, consider the danger that arises from the very notion of fame. Some scribes, particularly those who copied and preserved the works of great poets or philosophers, might become famous in their own right. Their handwriting might be recognized. Their work might be celebrated. But with fame comes the threat of being targeted by vengeful rivals or critics. A jealous rival might spread rumors that you are a forger or that you are incompetent. A literary critic might publicly denounce your work, ruining your reputation and your livelihood. You are not just a person, you are a brand, and your brand is vulnerable to attack. The danger is not just physical, it is reputational. And in a society that valued honor and reputation above all else, a ruined reputation was a fate worse than death. Historians still argue about the true extent of literary feuds in ancient Rome and how much they impacted the lives of scribes. But it is clear that a scribe who becomes famous for his work is no longer anonymous, and anonymity in this dangerous world is a form of protection. The air in the scriptorium is stale and heavy, and the silence is punctuated only by the scratching of your stylus and the rustling of papyrus. You've faced so many threats, both physical and abstract, that the quiet of your profession now feels like a tense prelude to disaster. Now, a new kind of peril emerges, one that is tied to your very reputation, the danger of being falsely accused of plagiarism. In a world without copyright law or formal citations, the line between copying and creating could be blurry. You might be tasked with transcribing an older work, perhaps a historical account or a poem, and your patron might claim it as their own. When the original author or a scholar who recognizes the work exposes the fraud, you, the scribe, are the most convenient target. Your patron can easily claim that you, in your zeal to please, plagiarize the work without their knowledge. Your perfect handwriting, the very skill that makes you a great scribe, now becomes evidence against you. You would have to prove that you were merely a copyist, not a creator, a difficult task when your patron's word is held in higher esteem than your own. A mainstream historical fact is that plagiarism was a recognized, but not always legally prosecuted offense in ancient Rome, often leading to social ridicule and professional ruin. Historians still argue whether such accusations were more about intellectual property or about personal rivalries. For you, the scribe, the distinction is meaningless. The result is the same: a ruined reputation and a lost livelihood. A quirky tidbit about Roman literature: some poets, like Martial, would write epigrams specifically to mock plagiarists, highlighting the social stigma of the act. You, a humble scribe, are now caught in the crossfire of literary feuds, a war in which your honesty is your only and often fragile shield. Beyond the literary world, you face a more brutal danger: retribution for being an informant. Perhaps you were forced to reveal secrets under duress, or you willingly betrayed a patron for a better position or a bribe. Whatever the reason, you are now a known informant. Your former patron or their allies will seek revenge. This retribution can be swift and brutal: a public beating in the forum, a poison slipped into your wine, or a quiet assassination in a back alley. You are a marked man, a traitor in the eyes of those you betrayed. Your life is no longer your own. It belongs to the shadows, to the constant fear of retribution. This is a danger that a gladiator faces every day in the arena, but you face it every time you step outside, every time you take a sip of water, every time you close your eyes. The danger is not from an enemy you can see, but from an enemy you cannot, an enemy that is everywhere. And what about the danger of being a witness to a murder or a violent crime? You're a scribe for a powerful family, and you witness a drunken brawl that ends in a stabbing, or you see a body being dragged out of a house in the middle of the night. You know what you saw, but reporting it would mean implicating a powerful family, a family that would not hesitate to silence you to protect its reputation. You could be killed to keep you from speaking, or you could be framed for the crime yourself. Your honesty is a liability, and your silence is an act of self-preservation. The very act of observing, which seems so harmless, now becomes a life-threatening act. This is a danger that a gladiator would understand, the sudden, brutal reality of violence. But for a scribe, it is a constant, quiet dread. The dangers of your profession are not just from the powerful. They are from the powerless as well. You face the danger of being attacked by an angry mob for transcribing an unpopular law or a tax edict. The Roman mob, as we've already discussed, was notoriously fickle and easily inflamed. If you are seen as the face of an unpopular policy, you could be targeted, and in the chaos of a riot, your life is worth nothing. You could be trampled, beaten, or even lynched by a mob that sees you as a symbol of the injustice they are fighting against. The written word, which is supposed to be a tool of order and civilization, has now made you a target for the very people it is supposed to serve. Finally, consider the most terrifying and most existential danger of all, the danger of being forgotten by history. You spend your life writing down the lives of others, the emperors, the generals, the poets. But who writes down yours? Your own name, your own story, is often lost to the sands of time. Your work, which you pour your heart and soul into, is often attributed to the powerful person who commissioned it. You are a ghost, a silent partner, a hand that wrote history, but a person that history will never remember. This is a quiet, personal tragedy. Your life is a testament to the power of the written word, but that word will never speak for you. A mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of scribes in the ancient world, even those of high skill, remain anonymous, their names and lives lost to the centuries. This is a fate worse than a quick death, a slow erasure from the very record you helped to create. The last rays of the Roman sun bleed through the window of your scriptorium, casting long shadows across your desk. The air grows cool, and the city's clamor begins to soften, giving way to the low hum of evening. You've journeyed through the labyrinth of your profession's perils, from the razor-sharp edge of imperial edicts to the insidious crawl of lead poisoning. Your life has been a quiet tightrope walk over an abyss of dangers, most of them unseen by the casual observer. Now we reach the final stage of this journey, a reflection on the legacy of the Roman scribe. Your legacy is not in the stone statues or the triumphal arches of emperors. It is in the quiet, enduring power of the written word. You were the human bridge between thought and permanence, the living link between a fleeting idea and its long-lasting existence. The very fact that we know so much about ancient Rome, its laws, its literature, its history, its daily life, is a testament to your quiet, diligent work. Without you, the words of Cicero would be lost to the winds, the campaigns of Caesar would be a vague memory, and the philosophy of Seneca would be forgotten. You are the unseen foundation upon which the entire edifice of Roman civilization rests. A mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of our knowledge about the ancient world comes from texts that were meticulously copied and recopied by scribes over centuries. Historians still argue whether the scribes, through their copying, inadvertently shaped our understanding of the past. But there is no doubt that their work is the bedrock of our knowledge. Your craft, for all its dangers, was a profound and powerful one. The very act of copying was an act of preservation, a small act of rebellion against the relentless march of time. You were a soldier in the army of knowledge, fighting against the forces of decay, oblivion, and neglect. A quirky tidbit. Some scribes would write a small verse at the end of their work, a colophon, asking the reader to remember the scribe who toiled to create the text, a small cry against their anonymity. You, the scribe, are a reminder that history is not just made by the famous and the powerful, but by the quiet, diligent work of ordinary people. Your quiet heroism is in the little things. It's in the meticulous straightening of a line of text, the careful sharpening of a stylus, the endless hours of concentration in a dimly lit room. It's in the physical endurance, the mental fortitude, and the unshakable commitment to accuracy. You are the embodiment of a kind of courage that is not celebrated in the arena, but in the library. A bravery not in a sword fight, but in the relentless pursuit of perfection. But the legacy of the scribe is also a cautionary tale. It is a reminder that knowledge, while powerful, can also be dangerous. It can be used for good or for evil. It can be a tool for justice or a weapon for oppression. And the person who wields that tool, the person who holds that weapon, is in a position of immense responsibility and immense peril. The story of the Roman scribe is a testament to the fact that the person who holds the pen is never truly safe. The dangers are always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a single mistake, a single moment of weakness. And now, as the sun finally sets and the oil lamp on your desk flickers, you can finally put down your stylus. The work is done for the night. You can stretch your aching back, rub your weary eyes, and let the quiet of the Roman night wash over you. The dangers of the day, the political intrigue, the threat of fire, the fear of mistakes, recede into the shadows. You are, for a little while, safe. The wind whispers through the window, carrying the faint scent of rain. You blow out the lamp, and the room is plunged into a comforting darkness. The world outside, with its politics, its scandals, and its dangers, fades away. All that is left is the quiet hum of your own breath, the slow beating of your heart, and the soft sound of a city settling down for the night. You can finally rest. The written word is a powerful thing, and you, the scribe, are its keeper. You are a bridge between the past and the future, a silent partner in the creation of history. And your story, a story of quiet courage and immense danger, is a story that should never be forgotten. The night is deep now. The world is asleep. You can close your eyes and finally, truly, let go.